Hey, Conscious Habit listeners. My goal is to help support you on your journey of discovering how to live from your highest and most fulfilled self at home and at work. And in that vein, I have some thoughts I'd like to share with you today. So meditate on this. Meditate on this. Own your 50. Conscious Habit listeners, I am appalled that I have never done a meditate on this episode about own your 50. Holy cow. First off, this has been my longest running keynote. I have given own your 50. It's been called many things over the years. It's called people suck. It's been called, own your 50. It's been called own your shit. But man, has this really been the catalyst to all things conscious habit. It truly began with this concept of own your 50. You may or may not know that I spent the last decade plus as a performance coach with an organization and would go in and teach sales and how to elevate sales, very psychology based, but with a lot of techniques and tactics wrapped around it. But Own Your 50 came in. I would go in and I would teach sales, and I could see we were having top line growth happening with organizations. We love this. They were seeing, really great results for the people that were sticking in it and being consistent. But we were seeing attrition because operations and service weren't operating with these same principles. So I raised my hand and I'm like, hey, I will be the poster child for helping these service and operations team begin to live these same principles so we can help them grow. So I did that. And it was fun. But the problem was not solved because what we saw was the next biggest issue was the relationship between sales and operations or sales and service. And I began to see that they hate each other with all their heart and soul in every organization, every size company, in every country across the globe. And so that became the next thing of like, okay, I don't like to put Band-Aids on things. I want to get to the root of where this, is coming from. And so I began to teach, dealing with conflict and all of that stuff. And what I could see was there was a lot of Cartman's drama triangle happening. People were living in victim or persecutor or in rescuer and creating more challenges. And there was a real lack of ownership. There was a lot of finger pointing. And I began to tell people like, hey, in the frustration pie, in the 100% of the frustration pie, I am aggravated for any reason. I have to take my slice. Because if I am frustrated, I am involved, which means I've got to take my part of that. I've got to own my 50%, if you will, but I've got to fully own my part. So if we are falling in victim, where it is like, hey, I just work here. Nobody tells me anything. I don't know what these people want from me. I'm doing the best that I can. They're not owning their part at all. They're like, pie? No, thank you. I'm full. You take it. And the persecutors are just trying to find somebody to blame. I can't believe they did this. And, I did this for them, or we said that. We're this kind of customer. They're not taking their piece. They're like, absolutely not. This is all on you. But then there's the rescuer. And the rescuer is the one who eventually jumps in and says, I'll just handle it. I'll just take care of it. Or on second thought, forget about it. I'm not even mad anyway. And they just sort of think that they're taking the whole situation. They're trying to own the 100, but there's no accountability for anybody else's part. So they create learned helplessness. And Own Your 50 really became this mantra of people to be like, hey, we need to control what we can control because I can't own your 50, but I can own mine. And what is that 50? Well, that is how I think, how I feel, and how I respond. As we've talked about in previous episodes, nothing's good or bad without our permission. I've got to own that I even see this as being negative. I've got to own that this frustrates me. I've got to own that I behaved in this way when I was frustrated. I've got to own that this is who I chose to be and how I chose to show up, and that there were consequences for those actions based on how this person chose to show up. I cannot own or change how they choose to show up and receive me or react to me, but I can control how I influence it through owning my 50. So my encouragement to you is in all areas of life, are you taking full ownership, owning your part, letting go of what you can't control? We cannot control what someone else thinks, feels, or does. We can influence, we can't control. But are we owning fully for ourselves? Or are we guilty of doing the justification dance, which ultimately isn't ownership at all? It's making someone else the scapegoat for how we chose to behave. But as we say often, we are stuck with us every second of every day. We can't escape us. Learning to take ownership means taking fully control of the power that you have in this world. And guess what? We're human. So we're going to show up in ways that aren't great. And it's okay to own that too. Because at the end of the day, we lack taking ownership because we're afraid that if we're wrong, it means we're bad. And when we learn how to love and own our own goodness, we can own everything else that comes with it.